Hello. Let me just change my name. This is my Hebrew school account. Okay. It's nice to see you all here. Hi, Stacy. Good to see
Hi,
you.
Clara. How are you?
Good. Hi, Yafa.
Normally I'm in my bed, but I'm staying up for you.
Amazing. Thank you. I appreciate that. So nice to see you all. Okay, we're going to get started. And hopefully more people will join and they will still manage to follow along. Okay, so why are we having such a class now? What is this series about? So I don't know if any of you recall last year, I gave a similar series where we also worked on certain elements of, things in our lives that we can work on to grow and actualize our potential, because the weeks before Shavuot are days that every single day before Shavuot, we count each day. Each day we count, and in addition to the number of day it is, there's also emotional attributes, right? Chesed is kindness. Some weeks we focus on this attribute of kindness that we can bring into our lives. The next week we focus on gevurah, discipline, and we attempt to bring discipline into our lives. And so we are preparing ourselves to receive the Torah on Shavuot. And each year it's as if the Torah is given anew, and we, just like the Jews spent 49 days after leaving Egypt preparing themselves to receive the Torah, every year we prepare ourselves to receive the Torah. And so while we're not going to be focusing on each of the attributes that are parallel to the number of the days that we count, we're still going to be focusing on self-help ideas, many of which can be found, in many books. But yes, thank you all for joining to attempt or get closer to actualizing our truest potential. So the class today, we're focusing on doing that through attention. So if you type in Google attention, types of attention, you'll get so many different things, right? There's selective attention, where you can focus on one particular thing. There's divided attention, sustained attention, and so many different ways our brains work when it comes to attention. What we're going to be focusing today, though, is attention in connection with our emotions, right? Or our psyche, our being. So the first attention that we're going to look at is a type of attention that we give to others or receive that leads to connection, right? When we all know when we're present, we all know if our minds are focused on the person we're speaking to, focused on who's around us. And when we're really present in a moment with the people we're around, we open the door for connection. And some of the greatest conversations that you can have are when you're not worrying about what to make for dinner, when you're not concerned about what time is it, when you really can be present and concentrate on another. That's a great gift, and that really fosters so much connection. And I know with my kids, right, it's hard to be present so much, but when I do, the environment is different. There's something that's so special about connecting. And something that's so interesting is that the Torah in Jewish law, it discusses that in a mitzvah, in a commandment that is God-given, there are two elements. There is the action itself, right? Like lighting Shabbat candles, giving charity, or any mitzvah. And there's a second component, and that is the attention and intention that we have while we're doing it. Are we present in the moment when we're doing a mitzvah? Yes, Mara just said that Shabbat is a great time for connection because exactly we are there's so many distractions that we remove. So Shabbat is a great time that, absolutely, I'll tell you right now, I don't have my phone on Shabbat. It's so much easier to be present and to be connecting with those around me. But so the second component in a mitzvah is the attention and attention that we give while we're doing it, right? If we're giving charity, but we're not thinking of what we're giving for or what we're doing, right? If we're lighting candles, but we're in a rush and we're, on to the next thing, then there's a component lacking to that mitzvah. There's something missing. And there's actually a whole discussion about, is the mitzvah considered a mitzvah, right? If you did it without the intention or the attention, because after all, that type of attention we just said leads to connection. And when we're present in doing a mitzvah and we're focused our attention on it, we're connecting to God. And after all the Torah and mitzvah is about connecting to God. And so there's a whole discussion, is it counted? What's better? Is it better for us to do something even though we're not present in that moment? Or is it better to have that attention and connection to God without doing anything, right? We know a lot of people say, in my heart, I'm a Jew, I'm connected to God. I have a strong connection to God, but then they may not do any good deeds or any mitzvot. And of course, at the end of the whole discussion, many rabbis, discuss, the conclusion is that, of course, the action itself is important, but the fact that it's a whole discussion of, is it a problem? Is it okay? Is it considered a mitzvah? Shows that this element of connection that comes through being present and having that type of attention is very important in a mitzvah. It's very important when we're connecting with God. And again, this being present is something that's extremely difficult in this day and age. We have so many distractions, not only just with our phones, but so much is going on. We're in a very overwhelming society and world. So it is very hard to be present. But again, just that awareness of, when you're surrounded by loved ones, when we're surrounded by people, that awareness that if I'm able to keep myself present and not letting myself get ahead of what I need to do tomorrow, what didn't happen, what did happen, then we can definitely foster better relationships and connections. By the way, at any point, feel free to ask any questions or type anything in the chat box. I'd love it to be a discussion. There's definitely so much that I don't know and that you have experience with or know that would be so nice to share with everybody and to hear. So the second type of attention that we're going to also mention is the type of attention that comes with a reaction of some sort, right? We all see things all the time, constantly, and our brains don't process everything really quickly, and very often they don't. It's not something conscious, right? Very often someone will say, "Oh, did you see that?" And you're like, "What? What did I see?" Physically, you saw it, but you didn't process it. So this type of attention comes with a reaction. Now, sometimes this reaction is hopefully positive, right? I noticed that my friend got a new car or got something, a new home, a new vacation, went on vacation, and you feel happy for her, right? You have that emotional space of happiness for her. Or you, God forbid, see somebody going through a hard time and your reaction is one of compassion and you feel bad for her. What can I do for her? So that type of emotional reaction is positive, and we hope that all the things that we see and we encounter, we respond with that positive emotional reaction and have a positive emotional space for what we've seen. Unfortunately, though, I don't know about you, but a lot of us struggle with, we see something, we're getting an emotional reaction, right? It may trigger us, but it's not positive. It's quite negative, right? We get sometimes a little stuck on how could that person have done that? Didn't they realize what it would have, what that could have done? Or why didn't this go this way, right? We get stuck a little bit on the things that we've noticed, the things that we've seen. And it takes up a lot of headspace sometimes, right? Sometimes it's very often prevents us from being present, because for the next 5 minutes, we may be thinking and trying to think, why do you think she did that? Or why do you think that could have happened? And there's so much that we can get caught up in based on what we've seen and what catches our attention. And very often this is a trigger, right? We all have experiences that we've been through, big and small, that shape the way we think, the way we view things. And they become a filter through everything we see. It comes through that filter and it gets interpreted a certain way, and it causes that emotional reaction within us. And being able to work on this, dynamic, being able to work on this and not letting us get taken over by what we see and what we notice, that's something huge. It takes a lot of effort. What also we sometimes do is we look outside of ourselves for approval, right? What will they think about this? Or our actions are very much with the focus of catching other people's attention, right? Or not catching other people's attention. So a lot of our attention when it comes to this category or this, type is very much external. It happens externally, right? We notice something outside of ourselves. We're worried about somebody noticing something about us. Again, that's out of ourselves. So before we get into understanding this and how we can combat this and how we can work with this, we're going to talk about the Baal Shem Tov. He was very, I think in the late, the date of when he lived just slipped my mind, but he was the very first one who shared the teachings of Chassidus. He began his journey right after the Jews were living in a very terrible times. There was a lot of divide between the Jews. They had been through many, many anti-Semitic pogroms and persecution. And the Baal Shem Tov came up with all his teachings, and he actually had been taught by it says he was visited by many, many holy rabbis throughout his youth who taught him all these incredible teachings, and he shared them with the world. And he had many students and so Hasidic thought began with him. And he had a teaching, and he said, everything that a person sees is either a lesson in his service to God, or if it's not a lesson in his service to God, it is a reflection of himself. So let's take the first part of that quote. It's a lesson in our service to God. So we can understand that, right? If we see somebody helping somebody, we can take a lesson from that and say, wow, I should be so kind as well. I should work on also emulating those traits, right? Or if we see somebody do something negative, we can say, wow, I know how not to behave. I see how destructive that behavior could be. I know not to go there. Right? It may be a little harder to figure out, wait, is really everything we see can be a lesson for us in our service to God? The Baal Shem Tov says, yes, if you think hard enough, if you analyze hard enough, you can figure out how everything that you encounter, everything that you see is intentional. There's a reason why you saw it, and it can send you some message in some way. The second part of his phrase is, it's either a lesson or it's coming to show you a part of yourself. It's a reflection of you. So what does that mean, right? If I see somebody, right, okay, if I see somebody doing something great, then, oh, great, you know, I also have the capacity to be kind. But what if you see somebody doing something really dishonest or really cruel or really terrible, and does that mean I'm a terrible person and I'm a cruel person? When can we figure out, is it a lesson for me or is it a reflection of me? And I need to now look internally and see, wait, do I have that cruel, you know, or dishonest bone in my body? So to understand this idea a little better, we're going to first look at the type of attention that we call noticing. So I don't know if you're familiar, but in a parenting book, I've been made recently aware of the power and tool of noticing, right? Because if you think about it, what is noticing? Noticing is when you see something, you notice something, and it ends there, right? There's no emotional reaction. There's no processing. What could that be? What could that mean? It's just, I noticed the store shut down and I move on with my day, right? I noticed that I'm stuck in traffic and I move on with my day. I don't have that, oh, I'm stuck in traffic. Noticing is something that is removed from your emotions, right? It just passes through. So, right, you have no opinions, you have no judgments, you just see something and that's it. So there's that element of attention. And we're going to talk about how we can, you know, how I was introduced to it in a parenting book and how we can channel it in like a little bit later. But for now, we're going to contrast this type of noticing, this type of attention to the type of attention that we just spoke about, the one that does trigger an emotional response, an emotional reaction. So there's a story that helps us to understand this whole idea of the Baal Shem Tov's teaching with these two contrasting ways of noticing something or seeing something. So I'm sure some of you have heard of Rabbi Y.Y. Jacobson. He's a world-renowned speaker and he gives lots of classes online. I definitely recommend you all, you know, check out the yeshiva.net, where he has so many incredible classes and teachings of Torah. So I was looking at one of his classes and he mentioned a story which brought this out. He said that, you know, he's a rabbi and he has a lot of people coming to him to talk, right? So he says that once it happened that two men came to him at two separate times talking about an experience that they had witnessed. He says the first person came to him and said, I want you to know that this person in your community is not as great as everybody thinks he is. I saw him do something extremely dishonest. I work with him and I saw him being extremely dishonest, and don't trust him too much. He is extremely dishonest, right? So this person was extremely upset that this person was getting dishonest and he was going on and on about it. Like, I can't even wrap my head how he could do such a thing. What a terrible person, you know? And he clearly was very emotionally reactive to seeing this person do something dishonest. And Rabbi Jacobson says another man comes to see him, you know, around the same time. And he says, Rabbi, what should I do? I work with somebody and I recently saw that he did something very dishonest. Now, what am I supposed to do? Can I ignore it? Or do I have an obligation to let my boss know? Or do I go out right to him and say, I noticed you did something dishonest. You should try to rectify it. I don't want to go to our boss, right? Rabbi, how do I approach this situation? And so Rabbi Jacobson says, he says, now I understood what the Baal Shem Tov said. He says, when you see something and it elicits a strong emotional response, it's because that person is a reflection of you. That person's dishonesty or that person's selfishness is coming to highlight your selfishness or whatever that negative thing that you saw that you're getting a reaction to. But if you see something and you aren't getting emotionally involved and you aren't feeling reactive, right? You definitely can think of a solution. How can I solve this? But you aren't, it's not consuming you, then you know that this is a lesson for you. It's not a reflection of you. And so, right, there's a difference between noticing something and getting involved in it. And nowadays, we actually know of such a concept called projection, right? We tend to see what, we all have tinted, glasses that we see the world. And if, 10 people see the same scene, they've all seen it differently because we're all different. And so we all have glasses that we perceive things in. And sometimes it's there to show us what we need to fix in ourselves. And this is sometimes hard to hear or hard to admit in the moment, right? When you really get upset about, look how controlling that person is, or look how negative that person is, it's sometimes difficult to admit, wait, and to take a step back and say, wait, let me see, is that I'm getting really reactive about this. It's taking up a lot of my headspace right now. I'm feeling my emotions rising. Could this possibly be a defect in myself? It's very hard to come up and say that, but we have to realize that we all, there's an element of self-love that we all have. There's an element of that we don't like to dig in and see our mistakes. Now, unfortunately, a lot of people do like to focus on the negative parts of themselves, but it's still sometimes very hard to see your exact defects and see those things that you need to work on without seeing them first in somebody else. And coming back to that tool of noticing in that parenting book, so there's a great parenting book that I love, and it's called, what's it called? It's called Easy to Love, Difficult to Discipline by Becky Bailey. She also wrote the Conscious Discipline course that a lot of schools follow. And it's just a lot of incredible stuff that is all backed up by science. So one thing that she talks about is she says that we very often can have a lot of benefit by using the tool of noticing. So how does it work? So we can say, for example, I noticed somebody, I'm giving an example. I noticed somebody not wearing a mask, right? And then I noticed that caused a lot of feelings to come up in me. So when we use that tool of noticing, it brings us back to the present moment, right? Even me, I noticed my kids are fighting, and then I can tell myself, I'm also noticing that it's getting me very angry. So that helps to center us and bring us to the present moment. And either at that time we can say, okay, I'll deal with why it's getting me angry another time, or right now, let me dig further and figure out, why is this making me angry? But when we can, noticing sometimes helps us to take a step back, right? Or see it from a higher perspective or from a different perspective, right? Because sometimes when you're stuck in something, you're not really seeing the bigger picture, you're just really stuck in it. But when we move to a perspective of noticing, we can say, I noticed that, and then I noticed that. And it can help us to stay present and not get so engrossed in what has happened. And something also interesting, that when we start to look internally, when we start to become present and we start to look internally, why is that making me angry? Why are these thoughts hijacking my space right now? They're not welcome here, right? Or when we start to uproot our insecurities and figure out why, right? Why do we act this way? What is it a response to? Why are we so consumed by certain behaviors that we're witnessing? And when we start to dig deep and to understand what's going on and understand what's behind it all, we really can and uproot these of course it takes a lot of work, but when we can uproot these elements that are causing us to really not live in the moment, then we're really one step closer to actualizing our potential. We really are. There's a story about this man, and this story is, you may have heard of it, it's told in many versions, but the story is true. It was a man by the name of Isaac who was from Krakow. I'm not sure the year, but he one day had a dream that under a certain bridge in Prague, there was a treasure. And so he sets out from Krakow all the way to Prague, goes over the bridge to attempt to dig up this treasure. And in those times, Prague had security by the bridges. Nobody could just come on whenever they pleased. And so the security guard tells him to stop. Where are you going? What are you doing? And he says, I had a dream that under this bridge, there was a treasure, there's a hidden treasure, and I'm here to dig it up. And so the security guard started laughing and saying, you're crazy. Well, guess what? I also had a recent dream that under the furnace in the home of Isaac in Krakow, there's a treasure too. I'm not crazy. I'm not going to go and dig it up. And of course, Isaac immediately realizes, hey, that's me. I'm Isaac. I live in Krakow. Let me check it out. So he schleps all the way back home, and he digs up behind his oven, behind his furnace, and he finds the treasure. And what he actually ends up doing with that, some of that treasure, he actually builds a synagogue in Krakow called, and it's actually standing there to this day. It was desecrated a little bit by the Nazis, but they managed to preserve most of it, and it's a place that you can visit. So the purpose of that story, though, is to show us that very often we will go to all ends to find a treasure, to find happiness, to find truth, when it's really all it is, it's sitting inside of ourselves, right? It's it within us. We can find all the happiness, we can find all the truth and all that we need within ourselves, because real joy comes from within. Real joy doesn't come from external factors. It doesn't come from having a beautiful home, having a beautiful car. Of course, that is nice and that's great. But real happiness and real joy doesn't come from that. Real joy comes, that type of joy is temporary, right? You go on, I love shopping, right? And shopping brings me happiness, and yet it's temporary. I have to go quite a few times, to fill up on that happiness, because that's not real happiness. Real happiness is something that's permanent. It's something that's long lasting. And that really comes with internal development, internal accomplishment, and from achieving something that we have achieved on our own from our work, right? When money that is earned versus money that is gifted, it's a little different. Now, they both make us happy, but the money that we've earned comes with a certain level of satisfaction that I worked hard for my money. So joy comes from within. And it's funny because when I was 19, I was studying in Israel, and I was asked to speak in front of 500 or over 500 girls my age. Now, at that time, I was extremely, extremely shy. If any of you know my son, he's very shy. I was also very, very shy. I did not, public speaking was probably up there in one of my fears, along with the rest of America. Apparently public speaking is one of the top fears. So I was very scared, but something made me say, yes, I'll do it. I'll speak in front of 500 or so girls. There was a reunion happening with a lot of schools that I was in one of them. And I remember I prepared and prepared, and I never imagined I could do it. And then I stood there and I spoke in front of 500 girls, and that feeling, even right now, like I can think back to that feeling of overcoming that fear of doing something I never thought I could do. It really brings me a certain level of like, I'm proud of myself for that, you know. There's a certain level of achievement, and that comes from within, and that's long lasting because it's something that you've accomplished. So so really joy comes from within. And so when we look when we look outside of ourselves for things to fill up that happiness tank, it's not going to fill it, right? Also, what we sometimes do is we blame our happiness on certain things that go on in our lives. We say, if only that was different, right? If only my circumstances were different, I'd be happy. If only I had those kind of children, I'd be happy. If only my life looked like this, then I'd be happy. These are the obstacles to my happiness. But then we'll never be happy, because this is what God intended for you. This is God. And we're actually going to be talking a lot about this discussion next week, when we're going to be talking about a lot of, sometimes it's very hard to accept our reality. But again, we need to remember to look inside of us, what we're given, the talents we have, the abilities that we have, because that's where the joy comes. The joy doesn't come from a perfect situation around us or beautiful things around us. And it can be very hard to focus on that and not let our, you know, our outer circumstances affect that. But so I heard something and it was so nice. It said, in order for there to be positive, there has to be negative, because positive wouldn't be positive if there wasn't such a thing as negative. Same thing with light and darkness. There wouldn't be light if there wasn't darkness. We all have darkness in our lives. We all have challenges. We all have things that aren't ideal, that aren't what we'd like them to be. But if we didn't have that darkness in our life, then we would never appreciate light. We wouldn't be able to focus on light, to even have light. And so, while this doesn't help us, you know, turn a switch and that's it, now we're grateful, now we're happy. But again, that awareness very much helps us to sometimes uplift us, right? We all go through things. We all have our good days and our bad days. And sometimes we all have tools that we have in our pockets to use when we sometimes get into those states. And so if this can be one tool sometime that can maybe work one time, then that's great. You know, in general, I'm a big believer that self-awareness is huge. You can't heal a part of your body if you don't know that it needs healing. You can't fix something if you don't know how to fix, if you don't know about it. So self-awareness, even just knowing certain realities about yourself, or getting to understand, wow, I do have those type of tendencies. Even if it's not going to be fixed in a day, it's not even going to be fixed in a year, but that awareness can help us that when we get there again, we can possibly take out something that we've heard, that we've learned, to help us keep ourselves centered and focused at not getting stuck in that negative wheel. And another beautiful thing that a quote that I heard is that, which also connects back to that, connects back to the beginning of the lesson when we talked about that type of attention that we're present, right? We said, and I see quite a few people joined a little later. We said at the beginning of our lesson that there's a type of attention that when we concentrate on another, when we're present in a moment, it really leads to connection. And it's one of the greatest gifts we can give to ourselves and to others, by being present and giving a type of attention that fosters connection. After all, we're social beings and we all need connection. And being in the present moment, there is only peace, which is powerful to think about, because if we're not at peace, it means to some degree we're in the past, or we're still focused on certain things about the past, or we are worried about the future. We're focusing on tomorrow, or something that's not relevant right now, right here. And so when we start to notice, right, paying attention to where our attention is and where we're going with our attention, we can start to try to get ourselves to the present moment, right? Try to start noticing, using that tool of noticing, of saying, I'm noticing that my mind is going in that direction. Let me bring myself back to the present. It's very big in the world. You know, I think I haven't read it, but I've heard a lot of things about the concept. It's also a book, The Power of Now. Even the concept of it, where being in the present, being focused in the present, keeping our attention to what's here right now is something that is so powerful and so incredible, and so needed to live a happy life. I haven't read the book. I heard there's a book, but that concept is throughout Judaism all the time, being present right here, right now. In fact, one of the Lubavitcher Rebbes, he was known for having success in time. And he was asked, what does success in time mean? It says, when he was in this moment, he was engrossed in that moment. He had, there was a time when he needed to be somewhere in 2 minutes, and his assistant said, why don't you prepare for what you're doing in 2 minutes? He says, right now I'm here, I'm not there yet. I'm going to focus on the present moment, not what's going to be happening in 2 minutes. And so that's something that is a lifetime of work, living in the present. But it's something that we definitely can benefit with just being aware of. The last thing that I want to leave you all with is a little bit about that quote that was under the class, under the topic of today's lesson, which is, you give power to what you focus on. So this is something that I've actually have been trying to work on. I think it's so powerful. And also known, another way you can say that is, what you focus on, you get more of. Think about it. The more you focus, say in any relationship, the more you focus on what's lacking, what your friend or spouse didn't do, the more you're going to have an imperfect view on the relationship. Or the more when you start going down the negative road, you're only going further and further, because negativity breeds negativity, right? Negativity doesn't bring to positivity. So the more you focus on, whatever you focus on, you get more of it. Because another also phenomenon is, when you think of something negative, our brain automatically brings more negative experiences to our minds to validate that feeling, to validate that opinion right now. So if you say, right, I always think my husband's very good about not leaving his socks on the floor, so I'll use this example. But if your husband leaves his socks on the floor, and you can say, oh, look, he's left his socks on the floor, he just doesn't, he's so messy. And then just like that, you're going to have other negativity thoughts that come to validate that opinion. Yeah, it's true. Look, have you seen his car lately? That's also a holy mess. And have you seen this? And you just go down a negative loop. That's in any relationship. And there's in parenting, they say, don't focus with your child on what you don't want, focus on what you do want. If you keep going on to your children about stop fighting, you're focusing on what you don't want, right? You instead say, please share, start sharing. Let's share. You focus on what you do want, because when you're able to maintain a positive attitude, it just leads to more positivity. So when we're able to stop ourselves in that loop of negativity, when we can stop ourselves when we're starting to focus on something negative, then we're going to stop that road of that leads to more negativity. And also, we also know that our brains are, every time we do something, our brains, the pathways in our brain get stronger. So when we keep having a negative perspective, or we focus on something negative, right? We can see something negative and move on. That's different. But when we get stuck on something negative, we're only going to strengthen that ability in ourselves. And nobody wants to be negative. It's not enjoyable to be negative or even be around negativity. So when we keep focusing on the negative, that's something that's going to be more natural for us to go. That's where our brain's going to go first thing. Yet if we start to think positively, be non-judgmental and keep positive and keep an open mind, that creates positive brain pathways. And then we're able to jump to positivity much easier than if we, because we're going to strengthen that muscle of seeing things positively. And this is something that I work on all the time. And this concept is also found in that parenting book that I mentioned, by Becky Bailey, where she says, when you tell your child, stop hitting, you're focusing on the negative. You're focusing on hitting. In their brains, they don't know an alternative. They're not learning an alternative. So when you say, don't hit, please share, or you focus on what they can do, that also in their minds brings them to see opportunity, see what they can do, as opposed to being also stuck on something negative or stuck on something that's we don't want. So yeah, I love that concept. And in ourselves as well, right? Sometimes we have a little bit of a negative self-talk. We need to stop it, right? Because negativity just will lead to more negativity. Nip it in the bud. And
Clara, I have a question.
yes.
So would you say the don't do, but also introduce an alternative, or you just introduce the alternative, do so and so, but also say don't? Like, would you?
So in the parenting book, it says you always have to first state with children, you have to state a boundary. You have to say, because that's how they learn that behavior is not okay. You can say, stop hitting hurts. Please, when you're so usually when a child's hitting, it's because they are feeling threatened, right? Somebody took their toy, or they're scared somebody will take their toy. So what would be the appropriate response if they're scared somebody's going to take their toy, is to give them the tool of confidence to tell the other child, don't take my toy. So you can say, so this is what I do all the time. Stop hitting hurts. If you don't want her to take your toy, you can say, please don't take my toy. Or if somebody is hitting, you state the boundary. We don't do that. That's not okay. And then you can focus on what they can do, focus on what they should be doing, not just saying, don't hit, don't do that, don't do this, don't do that. You're focusing on the negative behavior. It's probably also not helping them to feel good about themselves. But that was a great question. Does anyone have any other questions? Anyone have any other questions? I'm definitely not doing the parenting book justice, so I definitely recommend anybody reading it. It's a great book. So just to summarize our class today, we've looked at how we can actualize our potential through our attention. So we said that when we are aware of the power of our attention that leads to connection, right? Then we can try to keep ourselves present, keep ourselves from concentrating on another person, not letting our thoughts of and our distractions get in the way of connecting with, get in the way of that present moment, so we're able to connect. We also discussed the type of attention that really gets us upset. It really triggers us. It makes us feel, it makes us think about that idea, you know, think about how could she have done that and why did she do this? It really gets to us. And we spoke about how if we can uproot that behavior, start to use that tool of noticing, right? I noticed, because when you notice anything, it's not, you're not emotionally involved in it. It's something that passes by. So if you can bring yourself to the present moment using that tool, saying, I noticed this, and then I noticed my reaction was this, that can bring us to the present moment and lead us to look further internally and see, why is this even my reaction? What could possibly be the reason? And of course, this is a lifetime of work to uproot all our insecurities, all our fears, all our negative impulses, and we all have stuff going on. So that really is a great way that we can see where our attention is going and try to channel that. And then we continued with learning about how everything that we see is either a reflection of ourselves that reminds us we need to work on something, or is a lesson. And ultimately, all happiness comes from within. When we do this work of uprooting these negative, these things that hold us back, these thoughts that hijack our present moment, we really can achieve true happiness and true joy, because after all, that's where it comes from. It comes from within, it comes from internally. We all have that treasure just to be discovered within us, that peace, that presence that really lies within each and every one of us. And to conclude, the more we focus on being positive, the more we nip that negativity in the bud and we don't go down that route, the more we can live positive and happier lives. Thank you all for being here. Let me know if anyone has any questions. And so nice to see you all. Thank you so much. And I hope to see you next week for the acceptance part of our class. Take care, guys.
Thank you, Clara.
Thank you so much. So nice to see you all here. Mwah. Take care.
Thank you, Clara.
Thank you.